Captain Markuschen had been exploring alien ruins for over a decade, but nothing had prepared him for the Zephyrian Palace complex on Kepler 442b. The massive structure stretched across the horizon like a crystalline mountain range, its towers reaching toward the purple sky. Ancient technology hummed within its walls, systems that had operated without maintenance for thousands of years. Marcus moved through the corridors with practiced caution, his environmental suit reading the atmosphere as breathable but alien. The gravity was lighter here, making each step feel like a gentle bounce. His mission was simple: document the ruins, collect samples, and report back to the Human Colonial Survey. What he found instead would change everything humanity thought they knew about this sector of space. The palace had been abandoned for millennia, or so the initial surveys suggested. The Zephyrian civilization had vanished long before humans developed spaceflight, leaving behind only these magnificent structures and tantalizing hints of their advanced technology. Marcus had spent 3 days mapping the outer chambers, recording hieroglyphs that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. On the 4th day, he discovered the sealed chamber. It was hidden behind what appeared to be a decorative wall panel in the deepest level of the palace. Marcus only found it because his scanner detected an energy signature unlike anything else in the complex. The wall itself seemed to pulse with a faint blue light, and, when he placed his hand against it, the entire panel dissolved like morning mist. Beyond the wall lay a corridor that stretched into darkness. Emergency lighting activated as he stepped inside, illuminating walls covered in intricate murals depicting Zephyrian history. These weren't the static images he'd seen elsewhere in the palace. These moved, showing the rise and fall of their civilization in flowing, living art. Marcus walked deeper into the corridor, his footsteps echoing strangely in the space. The murals told a story of a proud people who had mastered incredible technologies. They showed Zephyrians traveling between stars, building cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants, and developing sciences that seemed to blend technology with something resembling magic. But the story took a dark turn. The later murals showed invasion, war, and desperate evacuation. Ships fleeing into deep space while their worlds burned behind them. Marcus studied the images carefully, noting details that his suit's camera system recorded for later analysis. The invaders in the murals were unlike any species in the known galaxy database. The corridor ended at a massive circular chamber. As Marcus stepped inside, the room came alive with soft, pulsing light. The walls curved up into a domed ceiling that showed a real-time view of the stars above. In the center of the chamber stood a raised platform surrounded by control panels that looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. But it was what lay beyond the platform that made Marcus stop breathing. A figure stood with their back to him, perfectly still, facing a wall covered in flowing symbols. They were humanoid but clearly alien, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light. Long, silver hair fell past their shoulders, and they wore robes that appeared to be woven from starlight itself. Marcus remained frozen in the doorway for several long moments. His scanner indicated the figure was alive, showing a steady heartbeat and brain activity. After thousands of years, someone was still here. Still waiting. The figure hadn't noticed him yet. Marcus could see them working at something, their hands moving gracefully over controls that materialized from thin air at their touch. The symbols on the wall responded to their movements, changing color and position in patterns that seemed almost musical. Marcus took a careful step forward, then another. His suit's systems were going crazy, detecting energy readings that shouldn't be possible. The very air in the chamber seemed charged with potential, making the hair on his arms stand up despite the environmental suit. That's when his foot hit a loose piece of debris. The metallic clang echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. The figure spun around instantly, their eyes wide with shock and what looked like terror. Marcus found himself staring into the face of what could only be described as an alien princess. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with large, luminous eyes that shifted between blue and silver. Her features were delicate but strong, and there was an intelligence in her gaze that spoke of centuries of experience. When she saw Marcus, her mouth opened in a silent gasp, and she stumbled backward against the control panel. For a moment, neither of them moved. Marcus raised his hand slowly, the universal gesture for peace, though he wasn't sure if she would understand it. The princess stared at him as if he were a ghost, her eyes darting between his face and his environmental suit. "I'm not here to hurt you," Marcus said softly, knowing she likely couldn't understand his words but hoping his tone would convey his intentions. The princess tilted her head, studying him with obvious confusion. She spoke then, and her voice was like music, even though Marcus couldn't understand a single word. The language was complex and flowing, with tones that seemed to resonate in frequencies he could feel as much as hear. She gestured at him, then at herself, then at the chamber around them. Her movements were graceful and purposeful, and Marcus began to realize she was trying to communicate. She pointed at his suit, then made a gesture that might have indicated breathing or life support. Marcus nodded and pointed to his chest, then gestured to indicate breathing. The princess's eyes widened with understanding, and she moved to one of the control panels. Her hands danced over the controls, and suddenly, the chamber filled with a breathable atmosphere. His suit's sensors confirmed it immediately. The air was not only breathable but perfectly suited to human physiology. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before reaching up and removing his helmet. The princess watched with fascination as he revealed his human features. The air in the chamber was warm and carried a scent like flowers and ozone. Marcus took a deep breath, marveling at how clean and fresh it felt compared to his suit's recycled atmosphere. The princess smiled then, the first expression other than shock she'd shown since his arrival. She approached him slowly, her movements careful and non-threatening. When she was close enough, she reached out tentatively and touched his face with gentle fingers. Her skin was warm and soft, and Marcus could feel a slight tingling where she touched him, as if her very being carried some kind of energy. The princess spoke again, her voice softer now, almost wondering. She gestured to herself and said what Marcus assumed was her name, though the syllables were complex and alien. She repeated it several times, speaking slowly as if teaching a child. Marcus pointed to himself. "Marcus," he said clearly. The princess tried to repeat it, her pronunciation close but flavored with her own language's musical tones. She smiled when he nodded encouragingly, and the expression transformed her entire face. There was joy there, and relief, and something that might have been hope. She moved back to the control panels and began working again, but now she gestured for Marcus to join her. As he approached, the symbols on the wall changed, showing images that were clearly meant to tell a story. Marcus watched in amazement as pictures formed in the air above the controls, three-dimensional and fully detailed. The images showed the Zephyrian evacuation he'd seen depicted in the corridor murals, but from a different perspective. He saw massive ships carrying thousands of refugees away from burning worlds. He saw the royal family, including a younger version of the princess, being loaded onto the last evacuation vessel. But something had gone wrong. The image showed the princess's ship being separated from the convoy, damaged and limping toward this world. It had crash-landed near the palace, and the princess had made her way here, to this chamber, to wait. The images shifted, showing her activating the chamber's systems, going into some kind of stasis that would preserve her life until rescue could arrive. But rescue had never come. The convoy had been scattered or destroyed, and she had slept for millennia, alone in the depths of the palace. Marcus stared at the images in growing understanding and horror. She had been waiting here for thousands of years for her people to return. She had awakened to find not her family or her subjects, but a strange alien who had stumbled into her sanctuary. The princess seemed to read the comprehension in his face. She nodded sadly and gestured to the images, then to herself, conveying her situation with heartbreaking clarity. Marcus felt a surge of sympathy for this being who had endured such unimaginable loneliness. But, then, the princess did something unexpected. She smiled again and gestured to Marcus, then to the stars displayed on the chamber's ceiling. She began working the controls again, and the star map changed, zooming in on different sectors of the galaxy. She was asking about his people. Where they came from, how they had traveled so far, whether they might be able to help her find her lost civilization. Marcus pulled out his tablet and activated the translation software, though he doubted it would be much help with such an alien language. But the princess watched with fascination as he worked, and when he showed her images of Earth and human cities, her eyes lit up with excitement. She gestured to the control panel and looked at him questioningly. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. Whatever was happening here was far beyond his mission parameters, but he couldn't ignore the situation. This being had been waiting for help for longer than human civilization had existed. The least he could do was try to communicate. The princess guided his hands to the controls, and Marcus felt the same tingling sensation he'd experienced when she touched his face. The controls seemed to respond to his touch, though not as smoothly as they had to hers. Together, they began to work on bridging the gap between their languages and their cultures. As they worked, Marcus became increasingly aware of the incredible technology surrounding them. The chamber wasn't just a communications center or a shelter. It was something far more advanced, something that could interface directly with biological consciousness. The princess wasn't just operating the controls, she was communing with them. Hours passed as they worked together. The princess proved to be incredibly intelligent and adaptable, picking up basic human concepts and language structures with astonishing speed. In return, she began teaching Marcus about Zephyrian technology and culture, using the chamber's systems to create immersive experiences that let him understand concepts that couldn't be easily translated. Through these shared experiences, Marcus learned that the Zephyrians had been a spacefaring civilization for millions of years. They had developed technologies that seemed to blur the line between science and art, between technology and consciousness. Their ships could travel faster than light by folding space itself, and their cities were living things that grew according to their inhabitants' needs. But they had also been peaceful, which had made them vulnerable when the invasion came. The attackers had been ruthless and technologically superior in military terms, overwhelming the Zephyrians through sheer brutality rather than superior science. As the princess shared these memories through the chamber's systems, Marcus began to understand the true scope of what had been lost. An entire civilization of incredible beings, scattered to the stars or destroyed, their knowledge and culture at risk of being lost forever. The princess seemed to sense his emotional response to her story. She reached out and took his hand, and through their physical connection and the chamber's systems, she shared something else: hope. She showed him images of other Zephyrian refuges, other hidden chambers and secret installations scattered across the galaxy. Her people hadn't just fled randomly. They had planned for the worst, creating a network of safe havens where their civilization could survive and eventually be reborn. But the network had been damaged during the evacuation. Many of the refuges had lost contact with each other, their inhabitants falling into stasis to wait for rescue that might never come. The princess had been trying to re-establish those connections when Marcus had stumbled into her chamber. Marcus stared at the star maps showing the locations of dozens of potential refuges. If even a fraction of them still contained survivors, it would represent the discovery of thousands of ancient beings with knowledge and technology far beyond anything humanity had encountered. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a first contact situation, it was the potential resurrection of an entire civilization. And, somehow, Marcus had become the bridge between humanity and these ancient refugees. The princess seemed to understand his thoughts. She gestured to the communications array and, then, to Marcus's tablet, indicating that she wanted to try contacting the human authorities. If her people were going to wake up after millennia of sleep, they would need allies in this strange new galaxy. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before activating his emergency beacon. This was far beyond anything he could handle alone. The Colonial Survey needed to know what he'd found, and they needed to know immediately. As the beacon transmitted, the princess watched with interest and growing excitement. She had spent thousands of years alone, maintaining hope that seemed increasingly futile with each passing century. Now, for the first time since the invasion, she had reason to believe that hope might be justified. Marcus looked at this remarkable being who had endured so much and felt a profound sense of responsibility. He had stumbled into her chamber by accident, but perhaps that accident was about to change the course of galactic history. The chamber's systems chimed softly, and the princess turned to the controls with evident excitement. She had detected something, a response from one of the other refuges. After all this time, another installation was awakening. Marcus watched as she worked frantically at the controls, tears of joy streaming down her face. Her fingers danced over the interface, and, suddenly, the chamber filled with a melodious voice speaking in the flowing Zephyrian language. The princess responded eagerly, and Marcus didn't need a translation to understand what was happening. She was talking to another survivor, probably the first contact she'd had with her own people in millennia. As he watched her reunion with her distant kinsman, Marcus realized that his life had just taken a turn he could never have imagined. He was no longer just an explorer documenting ancient ruins. He had become humanity's first ambassador to a civilization older than his species, and the decisions made in the coming hours would echo through history. The princess turned to him, her face radiant with hope and gratitude. She spoke in her musical language, but Marcus understood the meaning even without translation. She was thanking him, not just for finding her, but for giving her people a chance at a future they had almost lost. Marcus nodded solemnly, feeling the weight of the moment. Whatever came next, there would be no going back. The galaxy was about to become a very different place, and humanity was about to learn that they were not the only ones reaching for the stars. The Colonial Survey ship Endeavour arrived 3 days later, its sleek hull gleaming against the purple sky of Kepler 442b. Captain Sarah Rodriguez led the first contact team herself, accompanied by linguists, xenobiologists, and diplomats who had traveled here at maximum speed after receiving Marcus's unprecedented report. Marcus waited for them in the palace courtyard with Princess Lyralii, whose name he had finally learned to pronounce correctly. She had chosen to meet the new arrivals in the open air, wearing ceremonial robes that seemed to capture and reflect the alien starlight. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of communication and discovery as they worked together to prepare for this moment. The princess had established contact with 17 other refuges across the galaxy, awakening survivors who had slept for thousands of years. Each awakening brought new information, new hope, and new challenges. The Zephyrian civilization was stirring back to life, but it was a civilization that no longer had a home. Captain Rodriguez approached slowly, her diplomatic training evident in every careful step. The first contact protocols had been written for many scenarios, but none quite like this. Behind her, Dr. Elena Vesquez, the mission's chief linguist, carried an array of translation devices that seemed primitive compared to the consciousness-bridging technology in the hidden chamber. Princess Lyralii, Marcus said in his improving Zephyrian, then switched to English for the benefit of his colleagues. May I present Captain Sarah Rodriguez of the Human Colonial Survey, along with her team. Lyralii inclined her head gracefully, a gesture that somehow conveyed both royal dignity and genuine welcome. When she spoke, her words were still in Zephyrian, but the translation device Dr. Vasquez had been working on caught some of the meaning. She welcomes us to her ancestral home, Dr. Vasquez said, frowning at her equipment. Though the translation is rough. This language has conceptual structures that don't map well to human thinking patterns. Lyralii gestured toward the palace entrance, and they followed her through corridors that Marcus now knew led to wonders beyond imagination. As they walked, she spoke continuously, and Dr. Vasquez's translation device struggled to keep up. Something about time cycles? She's referring to the passage of eras, I think. And there's a concept that might mean star song or cosmic harmony. Captain, this language treats time and space as living things with their own consciousness. Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. Her briefing materials had prepared her for advanced aliens, but the reports from Marcus suggested technology and thinking patterns that challenged human understanding of reality itself. They entered the hidden chamber, and the Colonial Survey team stopped in amazement. The room had changed since Marcus's first visit. New displays showed three-dimensional star maps marking the locations of awakening refuges, and streams of data flowed across surfaces that seemed to exist in more dimensions than humans could perceive. Incredible, whispered Dr. James Park, the mission's xenobiologist. The energy readings are off the charts, but there's no obvious power source. It's as if the chamber is drawing energy directly from quantum fluctuations in spacetime. Lyralii moved to the central control area and gestured for them to join her. As they approached, the chamber's systems activated, creating a translation field that would allow true communication between species. The sensation was startling. Suddenly, Marcus could understand not just Lyralii's words, but the emotional and conceptual content behind them. The princess's thoughts carried harmonics of meaning that revealed depths of experience no human could fully comprehend. "Welcome, children of distant stars," Lyralii said, and now they could all understand her perfectly. "I am Lyralii of the Third Harmony, last daughter of the Resonant Throne, keeper of the eternal memory. Your friend Marcus has awakened hope that has slept for 3,000 of your years." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over despite her amazement at the translation system. "Your Highness, I am Captain Sarah Rodriguez, representing the human colonial government. We're honored to meet you, and we want to help in any way we can." Lyralii smiled, an expression that seemed to brighten the entire chamber. "Your species is young but strong. Marcus has shown me images of your worlds and your people. You have the gift of adaptation, of surviving in impossible places and thriving despite great challenges. These are qualities my people will need in the trials ahead." She gestured, and the chamber's displays shifted to show a tactical overview of the galaxy. Red markers indicated known locations of the invaders who had destroyed the Zephyrian civilization, while blue markers showed the awakening refuges. "The Devourers," Lyralii said, and even through the translation field, the name carried overtones of horror and disgust. "They consume not just matter and energy, but meaning itself. They turn order into chaos, beauty into ugliness, harmony into discord. They destroyed our worlds not for territory or resources, but because our very existence offended their nature." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, fascinated despite the grim subject matter. "You're describing something beyond normal conquest. They attacked you for philosophical reasons?" "More than philosophical," Lyralii replied. "The Devourers believe that consciousness is an aberration in the universe, that matter should exist in its base form without the complications of thought or feeling. They see civilizations like ours as infections to be cleansed." The implications hit the human team immediately. Captain Rodriguez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. "Are they still active? Do they pose a threat to human space?" Lyralii's expression grew somber. "Unknown. We lost track of them during the Great Scattering. They may have moved on to other galaxies, or they may be dormant, waiting for signs of new civilizations to destroy. Your rapid expansion across the stars may have already drawn their attention." Marcus stepped forward, having heard hints of this during his 3 days with Lyralii. "Show them the defensive network." Lyralii nodded and manipulated the chamber's controls. The star map changed, revealing a complex pattern of installations and technologies scattered across known space. Many were dark, their systems failed or damaged by time, but others still glowed with active energy signatures. "Before the final evacuation, my people established a galaxy-wide early warning system," Lyralii explained. "Sensor stations, automated defense platforms, and communication relays designed to detect and delay another Devourer incursion. Much of the network has failed, but some elements remain functional." Dr. Park studied the display with growing excitement. "The scale is incredible. This network spans entire galactic arms. The computational power required to maintain something like this is beyond current human capabilities," Captain Rodriguez finished. "But not beyond Zephyrian technology, even after thousands of years of neglect." Lyralii touched a control, and, suddenly, they were connected to the network itself. Information flowed through the translation field directly into their minds, showing them the current status of defensive installations across the galaxy. The news was mixed. Many critical nodes had failed, leaving vast gaps in coverage. But enough remained active to provide an early warning system that could give civilizations precious time to prepare for attack. "This changes everything," Dr. Vasquez breathed. "With access to this network, we could monitor threats across the entire galaxy. The strategic advantages are immense." But Lyralii shook her head sadly. "The network was designed for my people's consciousness patterns and technology. Humans could learn to operate it, but it would take generations of study to understand even the basic principles. Unless," Marcus said quietly, "we had teachers." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Lyralii was offering humanity access to technology millions of years in advance of their own development, but only if they could form a genuine partnership with the awakening Zephyrian survivors. Captain Rodriguez felt the weight of the decision before her. She had the authority to negotiate on behalf of humanity, but the scope of what was being discussed went far beyond normal diplomatic agreements. This was about the future of both species, and possibly the fate of the galaxy itself. "What would you need from us?" she asked carefully. Lyralii gestured to another display, showing the 17 awakened refuges. "My people have been scattered and isolated for millennia. We need time to reunite, to rebuild our strength, to decide what form our civilization will take in this new age. We need worlds to settle, resources to develop, and allies to watch our backs while we recover." "You're talking about a full-scale resettlement program," Dr. Park said, his mind racing through the implications. "Housing thousands of beings with completely different biology and technology. The infrastructure requirements alone would push human engineering to its limits," Captain Rodriguez agreed. "But the benefits?" She trailed off, studying the defensive network display. The strategic implications were staggering. Lyralii seemed to sense her thoughts. "There are other considerations as well. The refugees have been awakening for 3 days now, and we have made disturbing discoveries. Several refuges show signs of outside interference. Someone or something has been investigating Zephyrian installations." A new display activated, showing recordings from various refuge sites. The images were fuzzy and distorted, but they clearly showed ships and structures that belonged to neither humans nor Zephyrians. "Unknown vessels," Dr. Vasquez whispered. "They look almost organic, but with technological components integrated into the structure." Marcus studied the images with growing unease. "How recent are these recordings?" "Within the last 50 of your years," Lyralii replied. "And the interference has been increasing. Whatever these beings are, they have been systematically investigating our refuges and defensive installations. Some sites have gone completely dark." Captain Rodriguez felt her strategic training kick in. "You think they're mapping your network? Learning its capabilities and weaknesses?" "That is our fear," Lyralii confirmed. "If the Devourers have returned, they are being much more careful this time. They may be using proxy species to scout ahead of their main forces." The chamber's systems chimed, and Lyralii moved quickly to the controls. Her face paled as she read the incoming information. "Another refuge has just awakened," she said, her voice tight with worry. "But their first transmission included a distress call. They are under attack." The main display shifted to show a star map focusing on a system 40 light-years away. Energy readings spiked and fluctuated, indicating massive weapons fire and technological warfare. "The refuge on Kepler 1649c is attempting to defend itself," Lyralii explained, her hands dancing over the controls as she tried to gather more information. "But their defensive systems are 3,000 years old and operating at minimal power. They cannot hold out for long." Captain Rodriguez made a decision that would echo through history. "How fast can we get there?" Lyralii stared at her in surprise. "Captain, your ships are fast for your level of technology, but even at maximum speed, it would take weeks to reach that system. The refuge will have fallen long before then." "Not in human ships," Marcus said suddenly. He had spent 3 days learning about Zephyrian technology, and one possibility had been nagging at his mind. "The royal ship. The one you arrived in. Is it still functional?" Lyralii's eyes widened with understanding. "The Harmony's Grace crashed near the palace, but its core systems remain intact. I have been using its power plant to maintain the palace's deep systems." "But the ship itself?" She paused, her expression thoughtful. "It would be incredibly dangerous. The ship was designed for my physiology and consciousness patterns. Humans aboard during a hyperspace jump could suffer permanent neural damage." "Could you modify the ship's systems?" Dr. Park asked eagerly. "Create some kind of buffer or protection for human passengers?" "Perhaps," Lyralii said slowly. "The ship's medical systems are advanced enough to create temporary bioadaptation fields. But it would be experimental and risky. And, even if successful, the ship can only carry a small crew. Captain Rodriguez found herself facing another momentous decision. Attempting a rescue mission with untested alien technology was incredibly dangerous. But, if they could save even one refuge, they might gain invaluable allies and information about the new threat facing the galaxy. How long would it take to prepare the ship, she asked. 6 hours to restore basic flight systems and create the bioadaptation fields, Lyralii replied. But, Captain, you must understand the risks. This would be the first time humans have traveled in a ship designed for Zephyrian consciousness patterns. The experience alone could be traumatic. Marcus stepped forward. I'll go. I've already been exposed to Zephyrian technology for 3 days. If anyone can handle it, it should be me. No, Captain Rodriguez said firmly. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. I'll lead a small team of volunteers. Dr. Park, Dr. Vasquez, and myself. Lyralii nodded slowly. Very well. But, I must come with you. The ship requires a Zephyrian consciousness to properly interface with its navigation systems, and the refugees will need to see that the royal bloodline survives. As the team prepared for what might be the most dangerous rescue mission in human history, Marcus felt a sense of pride in his species that he had never experienced before. When faced with beings in need, humans didn't hesitate to risk their lives to help, even when those beings were aliens with incomprehensible technology. It was a very human thing to do, and, as Lyralii worked to prepare her ancient ship for flight, Marcus hoped that humanity's combination of courage, adaptability, and stubborn refusal to abandon those in need would be enough to face the darkness that was awakening in the galaxy. The Harmony's grace rose from its crash site like a phoenix reborn, its crystalline hull gleaming with renewed power. Inside, human and Zephyrian worked together to save lives they had never met, in a galaxy that was about to learn that some things were worth fighting for, no matter how impossible the odds appeared. The Harmony's grace dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 1649c in a blaze of twisted light that made reality itself seem to bend and flex. Captain Rodriguez gripped her command chair as the ship's inertial dampeners struggled to compensate for forces that human physics couldn't properly describe. The bioadaptation fields Lyralii had improvised were holding, but barely. Dr. Park was unconscious in his acceleration couch, overwhelmed by the sensory input of Zephyrian hyperspace travel. Dr. Vasquez remained awake but disoriented, her neural implants sparking with feedback from the ship's consciousness-based control systems. Transition complete, Lyralii announced from the pilot's position, though pilot was an inadequate term for her role. She was communing with the ship itself, her consciousness partially merged with its ancient AI systems. Sensors are detecting massive energy discharges in the inner system. We are not too late, but the situation is desperate. Through the ship's living viewports, they could see the battle raging around the fourth planet. The Zephyrian refuge installation had been built into the planet's moon, disguised as a natural crater formation. Now it was under siege by ships unlike anything in human records. The attacking vessels were biomechanical nightmares that seemed to violate several principles of physics. They moved with organic fluidity but fired weapons that channeled pure entropy, turning matter into increasingly chaotic configurations. Where their beams struck the moon's surface, rock didn't just vaporize, it forgot how to maintain its molecular structure. Devourers, Lyralii whispered, her voice carrying harmonics of ancient terror. They have returned. Captain Rodriguez studied the tactical display, her military training automatically analyzing the battle situation. The Zephyrian defensive platforms around the moon were putting up a valiant fight, but they were clearly outmatched. Ancient weapon systems fired streams of crystallized light at the attackers, but the enemy ships absorbed or deflected most of the incoming fire. How many survivors in the refuge? Rodriguez asked. Lyralii consulted the ship's sensors, her consciousness touching the distant facility's emergency systems. Approximately 300 individuals in various states of awakening from stasis. The refuge's automated systems have been trying to revive them for the past 6 hours, but the process cannot be rushed without causing neural damage. Dr. Vasquez struggled to sit up in her couch, fighting off the disorientation of alien travel. Can we contact them directly? Already attempting, Lyralii replied. Her hands moved over controls that seemed to reshape themselves to accommodate her touch. The refuge's communication array is damaged but functional. I am receiving responses now. The ship's main display activated, showing a three-dimensional image of a Zephyrian male who looked haggard and desperate. His robes were torn, and, behind him, the interior of the refuge showed signs of damage from weapons fire that had somehow penetrated the moon's crust. When he saw Lyralii, his eyes widened with shock and hope. He spoke rapidly in the flowing Zephyrian language, his words overlapping in his urgency to communicate. Commander Thalen of the 7th Harmony, Lyralii translated for the humans. He reports that the attackers arrived 3 days ago and have been systematically dismantling the moon's defensive systems. They're not just trying to destroy the refuge, they're studying it, learning how Zephyrian technology functions. Captain Rodriguez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. They're conducting technical intelligence gathering. This isn't just an attack, it's research. Worse, Lyralii continued as she received more information from Commander Thalen. The attackers have been broadcasting surrender demands. They want the refuge inhabitants to submit to something called cognitive restructuring. They're trying to capture my people alive. Dr. Park finally regained consciousness, his face pale but determined. Cognitive restructuring could mean anything from brainwashing to complete mental reprogramming. If these devourers are everything you've described, they might want to study Zephyrian consciousness patterns. The tactical display updated as more sensor data came in. Rodriguez studied the positions of the enemy ships and the remaining defensive platforms. Lyralii, what are the combat capabilities of this ship? Lyralii's expression became conflicted. The Harmony's Grace was designed as a royal yacht, not a warship. However, it does mount defensive systems appropriate for a vessel carrying members of the royal family. But, Captain, you must understand that Zephyrian weapons technology is based on principles that your people might find disturbing. How so? Dr. Vasquez asked, her linguistic curiosity overriding her discomfort. Our weapons do not simply destroy matter, Lyralii explained carefully. They alter the fundamental relationships between consciousness, energy, and physical reality. A ship struck by our weapons doesn't just explode, its crew experiences existential dissolution. Their sense of self becomes unmoored from physical reality. Rodriguez absorbed this information grimly. It sounds horrific, but if we're dealing with beings that represent an existential threat to all conscious life, we may not have the luxury of gentle methods. Another explosion bloomed near the refuge as one of the Devourer ships broke through the defensive perimeter. The energy discharge was visible even at their current distance, and Rodriguez could see chunks of the moon being torn away and consumed by the attackers. We're running out of time, she decided. Lyralii, take us in. We'll engage the enemy ships and try to buy time for the refuge to complete their evacuation procedures. Captain, Dr. Park protested weakly, we're one ship against 8 enemy vessels, using weapons technology we don't understand aboard a spacecraft we can barely operate. Rodriguez looked at him steadily. Those are 300 innocent beings down there, Doctor. They've been sleeping for thousands of years, waiting for rescue that never came. We found them, which makes them our responsibility. Lyralii's expression showed a mix of admiration and concern. Your species is either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. I am not certain which. Both, Rodriguez replied. That's what makes us dangerous. The Harmony's Grace accelerated toward the inner system, its crystalline hull beginning to glow as ancient weapon systems came online. Lyralii worked frantically at the controls, trying to adapt the ship's combat systems for human neural patterns while maintaining the vessel's operational integrity. As they approached the battle zone, the true scale of the Devourer ships became apparent. Each vessel was kilometers long, with hulls that seemed to shift between organic and mechanical configurations. They moved through space like living things, their weapons ports opening and closing like mouths breathing destruction. Incoming transmission from the lead Devourer ship, Dr. Vasquez announced, working at a secondary control station that Lyralii had adapted for human use. The main display shifted to show something that made all four occupants of the Harmony's Grace recoil instinctively. The being that appeared was humanoid in basic structure, but everything about it was wrong. Its flesh appeared to be machine components grown into organic patterns, and its eyes were empty voids that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When it spoke, the words came in perfect standard human English, though the voice carried harmonics that made their bones ache. Unknown vessel, you are interfering with a legitimate salvage operation. The failed civilization sheltering on this moon has been classified for reclamation and restructuring. Withdraw immediately or be designated for processing. Captain Rodriguez stood up from her command chair, her military bearing evident even in the alien environment of the Zephyrian ship. This is Captain Sarah Rodriguez of the Human Colonial Survey. The beings in that refuge are under our protection. Cease your attack immediately and withdraw from this system. The Devourer's expression didn't change, but something like amusement flickered in those empty eyes. Humans. We have observed your rapid expansion across this galactic region. You will be scheduled for evaluation in due course. Today, however, you are merely an inconvenience. The transmission cut off, and, immediately, 3 of the Devourer ships broke away from their assault on the moon to engage the approaching Harmony's Grace. Here they come, Rodriguez announced unnecessarily. She turned to Lyralii. Whatever you're going to do, now would be a good time. Lyralii's hands flew over the weapon controls as she synchronized her consciousness with the ship's combat systems. All human crew, prepare for weapons discharge. The sensory feedback may be intense. The first Devourer ship opened fire with beams that seemed to tear holes in space itself. Where they passed, stars in the background flickered and dimmed, as if the very fabric of reality was being damaged. Lyralii responded by firing the Harmony's Grace's primary weapons, and the effect was unlike anything Rodriguez had ever experienced. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, the ship discharged something that could only be described as crystallized harmony, a fundamental force that imposed order and meaning on chaotic systems. When the harmonization beam struck the lead Devourer ship, the vessel's organic mechanical hull began to reorganize itself according to more natural patterns. The biomechanical components separated from each other, returning to their base organic and technological forms. The ship's crew, visible through suddenly transparent hull sections, appeared confused and disoriented as their artificial mental conditioning was disrupted. Incredible, Dr. Park whispered, watching the enemy ship drift helplessly as its hybrid systems failed. You're not destroying them, you're undoing the unnatural modifications that made them into Devourers. But the other 2 ships adapted quickly, their hulls shifting to more mechanical configurations that seemed less vulnerable to the harmonization effect. They returned fire with weapons that made reality itself seem unstable in their vicinity. Lyralii threw the ship into an evasive maneuver that defied human understanding of physics, sliding sideways through dimensions that shouldn't exist. The enemy is learning to counter our weapons. This confirms our worst fears. The Devourers have evolved since our last encounter. The battle became a deadly dance through impossible space as both sides adapted and counter-adapted. Lyralii's ship was faster and more maneuverable, but the Devourer vessels were larger and carried more powerful weapons. Worse, more enemy ships were breaking away from the moon assault to join the fight. We can't win this with direct confrontation, Rodriguez realized. We need a different approach. Dr. Vasquez, who had been monitoring communications from the refuge, suddenly spoke up. Captain, I'm receiving data from Commander Thalen. The refuge has something called an Emergency Protocol 7, some kind of failsafe that was installed during the original evacuation. Lyralii's eyes widened. The resonance cascade. I thought those systems had been dismantled. If the refuge still has an active cascade generator, what does it do? Rodriguez asked as another enemy salvo forced them into another reality-bending evasive maneuver. It creates a localized field of pure harmony that extends across an entire star system, Lyralii explained, her hands never stopping their dance across the control surfaces. Everything within the field is forced into its most natural state. Organic beings are healed and restored, while artificial constructs are either purified or destroyed entirely. The implications hit Rodriguez immediately. The Devourers are artificial constructs. A resonance cascade would unmake them completely. Yes, but, at a terrible cost, Lyralii warned. The cascade draws its power from the consciousness of everyone within the field. Activating it would require willing sacrifice from hundreds of awakening Zephyrians. They would die to power the weapon. Commander Thalen's image reappeared on the communication display, his expression grim but determined. He spoke rapidly to Lyralii, and Rodriguez could see the princess's face grow pale with each word. The Refuge Council has voted, Lyralii translated quietly. They will activate the cascade to prevent Zephyrian technology from falling into Devourer hands. But, they ask that we rescue the youngest survivors, those who are not yet fully awakened and cannot make an informed choice about the sacrifice. Rodriguez felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. They were being asked to participate in a mass suicide that would save the galaxy from an existential threat, while simultaneously rescuing those too young to make that choice for themselves. How many young survivors? She asked. 37, Lyralii replied. All in deep stasis and easily transportable. But, we would have to enter the refuge while under active enemy fire and complete the transfer before the cascade activates. Dr. Park looked up from his sensor station. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups in the moon's core. Whatever they're doing down there, it's already starting. Rodriguez made the decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Take us in. We save who we can. The Harmony's Grace dove toward the moon's surface, dodging enemy fire and the increasingly unstable energy discharges from the refuge's weapon systems. Behind them, 5 Devourer ships followed, their organic hulls beginning to show signs of distress as the resonance cascade slowly built toward activation. As they approached the hidden entrance to the refuge, Rodriguez wondered if humanity was ready for the moral complexities of galactic citizenship. They were about to witness the ultimate sacrifice of an ancient and noble people, and there was nothing they could do to prevent it. But they could save the innocent, and sometimes that had to be enough. The Harmony's Grace touched down on the refuge's emergency hangar just as the first resonance pulses began emanating from the moon's core. The ancient facility shook around them as power systems that had slept for millennia roared to life, drawing energy from the very consciousness of the awakening Zephyrians. Captain Rodriguez led the rescue team through corridors filled with beings who had chosen to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. The adult Zephyrians moved with calm dignity toward the cascade chamber, their luminous skin growing brighter as they prepared to merge their life force with the ancient weapon. This way, Commander Thalen guided them, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what was happening. The stasis pods are in the deep chambers, protected by the facility's strongest shields. Dr. Park carried his portable medical scanner, taking readings as they passed the adult Zephyrians. Captain, their neural patterns are unlike anything I've ever seen. They're not just accepting death, they're transforming into something else. Pure energy, maybe, or crystallized consciousness. Dr. Vasquez stumbled as another resonance pulse shook the facility. The harmonic frequencies are increasing. Whatever they're doing, it's building towards something massive. They reached the stasis chamber to find 37 pods containing young Zephyrians in deep sleep. The beings inside were smaller than the adults, with features that seemed softer and more innocent. Even in stasis, their skin glowed with the same inner light as their elders. How do we transport them? Rodriguez asked urgently. Through the chamber's viewports, she could see Devourer ships descending toward the moon's surface, their organic hulls beginning to distort as the resonance cascade affected them. The pods are self-contained life support systems, Lyralii explained, her fingers dancing over the chamber's controls. But they must be moved carefully. Any disruption to the stasis field could cause neural damage. Commander Thalen activated an anti-gravity system that made the pods weightless. I will help you load them aboard your ship. It is the least I can do for our youngest generation. Working together, humans and Zephyrians began the desperate task of moving the sleeping children. Each pod was a masterwork of biotechnological engineering, maintaining perfect stasis conditions even as the facility around them prepared for its final act. As they worked, Rodriguez noticed something troubling about Commander Thalen. His luminous skin was gradually becoming transparent, and she could see patterns of energy flowing beneath the surface like living circuitry.
"Commander, what's happening to you?" she asked.
Thalen smiled sadly.
"The cascade requires conscious direction to target the enemy properly.
Someone must remain to guide it, to ensure that innocent beings in the outer system are not harmed by the resonance field.
I volunteered to be the final controller." Dr.
Vasquez looked up from her work with one of the pods.
"You're merging with the weapon itself. Becoming part of the guidance system."
"Yes," Thalen confirmed. "It is an honor to serve in this way, to ensure that our sacrifice has meaning. The cascade will cleanse this system of the devourer taint, but only if properly directed." They had loaded 23 pods when the first devourer ship breached the moon's surface defenses. The facility's corridors filled with the sound of organic weapons fire as biomechanical soldiers poured through the breach points.
"Contact front!"
Rodriguez shouted, drawing her sidearm even though she doubted it would be effective against heavily modified cybernetic beings. Lyralii stepped forward, her hands glowing with the same energy that powered the ship's weapons. "Stand back," she commanded, then released a pulse of pure harmony that struck the approaching devourers. The effect was immediate and disturbing. The enemy soldiers stopped advancing as their artificial modifications began to separate from their original biological components. Organic limbs twitched as they remembered their natural functions, while cybernetic implants sparked and failed. What emerged from the dissolution were beings that might once have been humanoid, but they had been so heavily modified that their original species was unrecognizable. They collapsed to the floor, their consciousness struggling to reassemble itself after millennia of forced integration with machine systems.
"Keep moving," Rodriguez ordered. "We can't help them now."
They loaded the remaining pods under increasingly difficult conditions as the cascade resonance grew stronger. The facility's walls began to glow with inner light, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with harmonic frequencies that made human teeth ache. Commander Thalen was becoming increasingly transparent, his consciousness merging with the cascade control systems. "Captain Rodriguez," he said, his voice now carrying multiple harmonic overtones, "you must understand what you are witnessing.
This is not just a weapon, it is the final gift of our civilization to the galaxy." "What do you mean?"
Rodriguez asked as they secured the last stasis pod.
"The resonance cascade does more than destroy artificial constructs," Thalen explained.
"It leaves behind an echo, a harmonic pattern that will make this entire system resistant to future devourer incursions.
Any artificial beings that enter this space will find their unnatural modifications gradually undone."
Dr. Park looked up from his medical scanner with excitement.
"You're creating a permanent field effect.
A zone where consciousness and natural order are reinforced against external corruption." "Exactly," Thalen confirmed. "And, because the cascade is powered by willing sacrifice, by conscious choice rather than imposed force, its effects will spread beyond this system.
Each being touched by the resonance will carry a fragment of its protection with them." The implications were staggering.
Rodriguez realized they weren't just witnessing the destruction of a devourer's strike force, they were seeing the birth of a new kind of defense against existential threats to consciousness itself.
"All pods secured," Dr. Vasquez reported as they reached the Harmony's grace.
The ship's loading bay was packed with stasis pods, each one containing a sleeping child who represented the future of an ancient civilization. Lyralii took her place at the pilot station as resonance pulses from the moon's core began affecting their ship's systems.
"Emergency departure in 30 seconds.
All crew, prepare for immediate hyperspace transition." Through the ship's viewports, they could see the devourer ships trying desperately to escape the moon's gravity well. The organic components of their hulls were beginning to separate from mechanical elements, leaving the vessels increasingly unstable and unable to maintain cohesion.
"Commander Thalen, final message incoming," Dr. Vasquez announced.
Thalen's image appeared on the communication display, but he was now more energy patterned than physical being. When he spoke, his words resonated with harmonics that seemed to come from the moon itself.
"Princess Lyralii, Captain Rodriguez, remember what you have witnessed here.
The devourers can be defeated, but only through the conscious choice of free beings to defend what they cherish. Carry this knowledge to the other refuges. Unite the scattered remnants of our people, and show them that hope still exists. The communication cut off as the Harmony's grace lifted away from the moon's surface. Behind them, the cascade reached critical resonance, and the entire moon began to glow like a small star. The effect spread outward at the speed of light, washing over the fleeing devourer ships and dissolving their artificial components like morning frost in sunlight. Where biomechanical constructs had been, only confused organic beings remained, floating in escape pods and struggling to remember who they had been before their forced conversion. "Jump now," Rodriguez ordered, and Lyralii engaged the hyperspace drive. The transition away from Kepler 1649c was unlike their earlier jump. The resonance cascade had charged local space with harmonic energy, and their passage through hyperspace carried echoes of that resonance. Each crew member felt something fundamental shift in their consciousness, a new awareness of the connections between all thinking beings. When they dropped back into normal space near Kepler 442b, the effects were immediately apparent. Dr. Park's medical scanners showed enhanced neural connectivity in all human crew members. Dr. Vasquez reported that her translation systems were now operating with impossible efficiency, as if language barriers were becoming irrelevant. Most remarkably, Rodriguez found that she could sense the consciousness of the sleeping Zephyrian children in their stasis pods. Not their thoughts, exactly, but their essential nature as thinking, feeling beings with hopes and dreams and fears. "The resonance cascade has changed us," Lyralii confirmed. "Humans who have been touched by its effects will find it easier to interface with Zephyrian technology and consciousness. You have become bridges between our species." Landing at the palace complex, they found a transformation already underway. Word of the successful rescue mission had spread throughout the Awakening refugee network, and representatives from 12 different installations were en route to Kepler 442b for an emergency council. More importantly, human reinforcements had arrived. Admiral Chen, Marcus's father and commander of the Colonial Survey's Third Fleet, was orbiting the planet with a squadron of humanity's most advanced ships. The reunion between father and son was emotional but brief. Admiral Chen had read the mission reports and understood the magnitude of what had been discovered. "Son, what you found here changes everything. The civilian government is sending a full diplomatic mission, and the military council wants detailed briefings on these devourer capabilities. It's bigger than just military concerns," Admiral Rodriguez reported as they gathered in the palace's main chamber. "We're dealing with a threat to the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. Traditional military responses may not be adequate." Lyralii, still adapting to the strange aftereffects of the resonance cascade, addressed the assembled humans and awakening Zephyrians. "The sacrifice at Kepler 1649c has bought us time, but it has also revealed our enemy's evolved capabilities. The devourers have learned to counter our traditional defenses. We must find new ways to protect what we cherish." Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays showing devourer movement patterns across the galaxy. "Princess, what would you need from humanity to mount an effective defense?" The question hung in the air as representatives from both species contemplated an alliance that would reshape galactic civilization. The sleeping children in their stasis pods represented hope for the future, but only if that future could be protected from the darkness that threatened to consume all conscious thought. Dr. Vasquez, her enhanced translation abilities now allowing her to understand nuances in Zephyrian communication that had previously been impossible, spoke up. "There's something else. The resonance cascade didn't just affect this local area. I'm receiving reports from the other refuges that they felt the harmonic echo across interstellar distances." "Meaning what?" Admiral Chen asked. "Meaning," Lyralii said with growing excitement, "that the sacrifice at Kepler 1649c has awakened something that has been dormant for millennia. The deep harmony that once connected all Zephyrian installations is beginning to re-establish itself." She manipulated the chamber's controls, and suddenly, they could see it, a network of resonance connections spreading across the galaxy like neurons in a vast brain. The refugee installations were communicating with each other in ways that transcended normal spacetime limitations. "It's beautiful," Dr. Park whispered, watching patterns of light flow between distant stars. "And dangerous," Rodriguez added grimly. "If we can see this network, so can our enemies."
We may have just painted targets on every Zephyrian refuge in the galaxy. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in.
Their rescue mission had been successful, but it had also announced to the cosmos that both humans and Zephyrians were no longer hiding. The next phase of the war for the fate of consciousness itself was about to begin.
Admiral Chen turned to his son.
Marcus, you started something here that's going to require everything humanity can give.
Are we ready for what's coming? Marcus looked at the sleeping children, then, at the patterns of light connecting distant refuges across the galaxy. Dad, I don't think anyone could be ready for what's coming. But, that's never stopped humans before.
In the depths of space, ancient sensors detected the resonance cascade and began transmitting warnings across unimaginable distances.
The Devourer's main force, dormant for millennia in the void between galaxies, began to stir. The final war for the soul of the universe was about to begin.
6 months after the resonance cascade at Kepler 1649c, the galaxy had become a very different place.
The Harmony Protocol, as historians would later call it, had established the first true alliance between humanity and an ancient alien civilization. The results exceeded everyone's expectations and challenged everyone's assumptions about the nature of consciousness itself.
Captain Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, humanity's first joint construction project with the Zephyrians. The massive facility orbited a binary star system in neutral space, its architecture blending human engineering with Zephyrian harmonic principles in ways that created something entirely new. Through the viewport, he could see ships from dozens of species arriving daily. Word of the Human-Zephyrian alliance had spread throughout the galaxy, attracting civilizations that had hidden themselves for millennia to avoid devourer attention. "Remarkable," said Ambassador Lyralii, approaching with her characteristic grace. The former princess had adapted to diplomatic life with the same elegance she had once brought to royal duties. The resonance cascade had changed her as well. Her connection to human consciousness patterns now allowed her to understand cultural nuances that had previously been impossible to bridge. 23 species have joined the Consciousness Protection Alliance in the past month alone, Marcus observed. The aquatic collective from Tau Ceti, the silicon mines from the Vega system, even the energy beings from the galactic core. I never imagined such diversity of thought was possible. Lyralii smiled, an expression that now carried harmonics of meaning that Marcus could actually perceive thanks to his resonance exposure.
Consciousness finds a way to express itself in every possible configuration.
What matters is not the form it takes, but the choice to think, to feel, to grow. Behind them, the station bustled with activity that would have been impossible just months before. Human engineers worked alongside Zephyrian consciousness architects to design defensive systems that operated on principles of harmony rather than destruction. Aquatic collective philosophers shared deep ocean meditation techniques with silicon minds who experienced existence in nanosecond intervals.
Status report from Admiral Rodriguez? Marcus asked.
The fleet exercises in the Kepler 442 system are proceeding ahead of schedule, Lyralii confirmed.
Human adaptability continues to amaze our tactical councils. Your people have learned to operate resonance-enhanced vessels faster than we thought biologically possible.
Marcus nodded, but his expression remained troubled.
Any word from the deep space monitoring stations? Lyralii's demeanor became more serious. The Watchers report increasing activity in the void regions between galactic arms. The Devourer main force is definitely responding to the Cascade event. Their vanguard fleets have begun moving toward our galaxy. The observation deck's main display activated, showing a tactical overview of the galaxy. Red markers indicated confirmed Devourer movements, while blue markers showed Alliance defensive positions.
The pattern was clear: a massive force was approaching from the emptiness between galaxies, while Alliance defenders rushed to complete preparations for the largest conflict in recorded history.
How long do we have? Marcus asked.
The Zephyrian deep space mathematicians estimate 18 months before the first major incursions, Lyralii replied. But their vanguard scouts are already probing our outer defenses. 3 Alliance worlds have reported contact with reconnaissance forces. Dr. Elena Vasquez joined them, her research tablet displaying streams of data from across the galaxy.
Since the Cascade, her enhanced linguistic abilities had made her the Alliance's premier xenosociologist. The preliminary reports from those encounters are encouraging, she announced. The Vanguard scouts are still using pre-Cascade Devourer technology. Our new harmonic defenses are proving effective. Effective how? Marcus inquired. The biomechanical constructs are vulnerable to localized resonance fields, Dr. Vasquez explained enthusiastically. When they encounter Alliance defenders equipped with resonance amplifiers, their artificial modifications begin to break down. We're not just stopping them, we're freeing the consciousness trapped within their hybrid systems. This was perhaps the most remarkable discovery of the past 6 months. The Devourers weren't purely artificial beings, but rather organic creatures that had been forcibly modified into biomechanical constructs. Each freed Devourer revealed fragments of their original civilization, providing crucial intelligence about the enemy's capabilities and motivations. The liberation centers on Earth and New Zephyria are processing nearly 50 recovered beings per week, Lyrelii added. Each one provides new insights into Devourer psychology and tactics. We're learning that their conversion process is not irreversible, conscious choice can overcome even the most invasive modifications. Marcus studied the tactical display, noting the positions of the Alliance's mobile defense fleets. Human ships, their hulls now incorporating Zephyrian harmonic resonators, worked alongside vessels from 24 allied species. Each fleet combined the unique capabilities of its member civilizations into something greater than the sum of its parts. Speaking of conscious choice, Dr. Vasquez said, we've received responses from the Zephyrian children rescued from Kepler 1649c. They're fully awakened now and asking to participate in the defense preparations. This was a delicate subject. The 37 young Zephyrians represented the largest single group of their species' next generation. Their unique position as beings who had awakened in an era of human-Zephyrian cooperation made them natural ambassadors between the species. What do the child psychology experts recommend? Marcus asked. Dr. Park's team believes they should be allowed to contribute according to their abilities, Lyrelii replied. Zephyrian development patterns are different from human ones. These children possess adult-level consciousness in many areas while remaining childlike in others. Denying them meaningful participation in their people's survival could cause psychological damage. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. 6 months ago, they had risked their lives to save these children from the choice of sacrifice. Now, the children themselves were choosing to face the same existential threat that had claimed their elders. There's something else, Dr. Vasquez added quietly. The children are reporting shared dreams since their awakening. They're developing a collective consciousness that's unlike anything we've observed in either human or adult Zephyrian psychology. Marcus felt a familiar chill that had become his response to paradigm-shifting discoveries. What kind of collective consciousness? They dream together, Lyrelii explained, her expression thoughtful. Each night, their minds touch across the boundaries between individuals, sharing experiences and insights. They're becoming something new, neither fully individual nor completely collective, but something in between. Could this be an evolutionary response to the Cascade exposure? Dr. Vasquez wondered aloud. The resonance event affected them while their consciousness patterns were still forming. They may have developed capabilities that neither parent species possesses. Before Marcus could respond, the station's alert system activated. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez's voice echoed throughout the observation deck as she transmitted from the flagship of the 3rd Defense Fleet. All senior staff to Emergency Briefing Room 7. We've got incoming data from Deep Space Monitor Station Alpha. Priority Alpha classification. The three rushed through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy, all moving with the purposeful urgency of people who knew that galactic civilization hung in the balance. The emergency briefing room was already packed when they arrived, with holographic representations of military commanders and civilian leaders from across Alliance space. Admiral Rodriguez appeared in the center of the room, her image transmitted from the bridge of her flagship. Behind her, tactical displays showed real-time data from humanity's deepest space monitoring systems.
Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, she began. 6 hours ago, Deep Space Monitor Station Alpha detected massive hyperspace distortions in the void between the Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies. The scale of the distortions indicates a fleet larger than anything in our threat assessment models.
The tactical display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of local space.
Beyond the galaxy's edge, red indicators marked the detected distortions. The sheer number of markers made the room fall silent.
"How many ships?" asked General Morrison, commander of Human Colonial Defense Forces.
Conservative estimate, 50,000 capital ships, with support vessels numbering in the hundreds of thousands, Admiral Rodriguez replied grimly. If our projections are correct, this represents the mobilization of the entire Devourer civilization. Ambassador Twara of the Aquatic Collective, her translation device struggling with the harmonics of her underwater speech patterns, asked the question on everyone's mind.
Estimated time to arrival in our galaxy? 14 months, Rodriguez confirmed. Less than our original projections. They're moving faster than expected.
Marcus felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settle on his shoulders. In finding Princess Lyraliai's chamber, he had triggered a chain of events that led to the awakening of the galaxy's greatest threat. The irony that his discovery might also provide the tools for survival wasn't lost on him. Defense recommendations? Asked Lyraliai, her diplomatic training keeping her voice steady despite the magnitude of the threat. Admiral Rodriguez gestured, and the display shifted to show Alliance defensive preparations.
Full activation of the resonance network.
Every inhabited system with harmonic amplification capabilities goes online simultaneously. We create a galaxy-wide field of consciousness protection that makes Devourer conversion technology ineffective. The plan was audacious in its scope. By linking the consciousness-enhancing technology of dozens of species across hundreds of star systems, the Alliance hoped to create a defensive field that would protect the entire galaxy from Devourer influence. Resource requirements? Inquired Architect Jindal of the Silicon Mines, her crystalline form sparkling as she processed calculations at superhuman speeds.
Everything we have and more, Rodriguez admitted.
Every industrial facility in Alliance space will need to focus on harmonic amplifier construction. Every ship will need resonance upgrades. Every planet will need consciousness protection installations.
Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. Admiral, what about the psychological requirements? Operating a galaxy-wide resonance network will require unprecedented cooperation between conscious beings. The mental strain alone could cause system-wide breakdown.
Which brings us to our most important asset, Admiral Rodriguez replied, gesturing toward a section of the briefing room where 37 young Zephyrians stood together. The children had grown since their rescue, but they retained the luminous skin and graceful features of their species. What was new was the way they moved and spoke in perfect synchronization, as if guided by a shared consciousness that transcended individual identity. One of them, Keitha, who had emerged as their informal spokesperson, stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that reached every being in the room, regardless of their species or communication methods. Honored allies, Keitha said, her words somehow understandable to everyone present without need for translation.
We volunteer to serve as the focal points for the resonance network.
Our shared consciousness can coordinate the harmonic fields across galactic distances while maintaining the individual freedom that makes consciousness worth protecting.
The room erupted in debate.
Asking children to serve as the nexus for a defense system that would determine the fate of galactic civilization violated every instinct about protecting the young. Marcus found himself thinking about his first meeting with Princess Lyraliai, when he had stumbled into her chamber and accidentally awakened an ancient hope. Now, children barely a year old in subjective experience were volunteering to carry the weight of cosmic responsibility.
The risk, Ambassador Lyraliai said carefully, is enormous. Serving as harmonic focal points could damage or destroy your individual personalities. You could lose yourselves in the network. Keitha smiled with a wisdom that seemed ancient despite her youth. Honored Princess, we are already more than individual.
Our consciousness spans the space between selves while preserving what makes each of us unique.
We are not afraid of unity, we are afraid of isolation. Dr. Vasquez pulled up her research data. The psychological profiles support their assessment.
These children have developed a form of consciousness that's both individual and collective. They may be the only beings in the galaxy capable of maintaining personal identity while operating at network scales. The debate continued for hours, but, ultimately, the mathematics were inescapable. Without the children's unique consciousness pattern to coordinate the network, the resonance field would collapse under its own complexity. With their help, every thinking being in the galaxy could be protected from forced conversion. As the meeting broke up and beings dispersed to begin the massive preparations required, Marcus found himself alone with Keitha on the observation deck. The young Zephyrian stood looking out at the stars, her expression thoughtful. "Do you regret it?" she asked without turning around. "Entering the chamber that day? Starting the chain of events that led to this moment?" Marcus considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, I was an explorer looking for artifacts. Now, the fate of consciousness itself may depend on decisions made by children I helped rescue. It's not the life I planned. Keitha turned to face him, her luminous eyes reflecting starlight. But, is it the life you choose? The simple question cut to the heart of everything they had learned about consciousness and choice. The Devourers forced conversion, stripping away the ability to make meaningful decisions. The Alliance fought to preserve that choice, even when the choices were difficult or dangerous. Yes, Marcus said finally. If consciousness is worth protecting, then it's worth protecting even when the cost is enormous. Even when children have to make choices that should never be required of them. Keitha smiled, and, for a moment, she looked exactly like what she was, a young being facing an uncertain future with hope instead of fear. Then, we will succeed. Consciousness finds a way to express itself in every possible configuration, and choice creates possibilities that force alone can never achieve. Through the viewport, ships from across the galaxy continued their preparations for the greatest battle in cosmic history. Human engineering, Zephyrian harmony, aquatic meditation, silicon calculation, and dozens of other consciousness patterns working together toward a common goal. Marcus realized that regardless of the outcome, they had already achieved something remarkable. The galaxy would never again be a place where thinking beings hid in isolation from each other. Whatever emerged from the coming conflict, it would be shaped by the conscious choice of free minds working together. The final war for the soul of the universe was approaching, but it would be fought by beings who had learned that consciousness, in all its myriad forms, was worth any sacrifice to preserve. And, sometimes, that was enough to change the outcome of even the most impossible conflicts. In the depths of space, the Devourer fleets continued their approach, but they were no longer facing scattered, isolated civilizations. They were approaching a galaxy that had learned the true power of conscious choice, and that power was about to be tested on a scale that would echo through the cosmos for millennia to come.